I never thought I would be standing in a courtroom watching a billionaire's son get handcuffed, but there I was, holding the hand of a woman who had spent 5 years living in the streets, a woman who everyone thought was dead. The judge's gavel came down like thunder, and Richard Brooks, the man who had once splashed dirty gutter water on me from his Rolls Royce and called me trash, was being led away in chains. But let me back up, because this story doesn't start with victory. It starts with me holding an eviction notice in the pouring rain, watching my son die. If you want to hear how a homeless woman and a desperate mother brought down a corrupt empire, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation. Now let me take you back to where it all began. 3 months earlier, I was standing in front of my apartment building in Chicago, rain soaking through my threadbare coat, staring at the bright orange eviction notice taped to my door. 24 hours. That is all I had left before my 5 children and I would be on the street. The paper was already curling at the edges from the moisture, the black letters bleeding slightly, but the message was crystal clear. Pay $3,000 by noon tomorrow or get out. My hands were shaking, and it was not just from the cold. Inside that apartment, my 10-year-old son Maddie was lying on the couch, his lips tinged blue, his breathing shallow and rapid. He had been born with a congenital heart defect, and every day was a gamble. Earlier that evening, he had collapsed while helping me fold laundry. I had grabbed the phone to call 911, my fingers fumbling with the numbers, but then I remembered. Our health insurance had lapsed 2 weeks ago. I couldn't afford the premium. If I took him to the hospital now, if they admitted him, the bills would be astronomical. We would lose everything. We already had nothing, but somehow I knew it could get worse. So instead of calling for help, I did what desperate mothers do. I left my 9-year-old daughter Emma in charge, told her to watch her siblings, and I ran out into the storm to the 24-hour pharmacy 6 blocks away. My sneakers worn so thin, I could feel every crack in the sidewalk splash through puddles. My lungs burned. All I could think about was getting back to Maddie with something, anything to help him breathe easier, to bring the color back to his face. I was crossing 5th Avenue, my vision blurred by rain and tears, when I heard the roar of an engine. Headlights blinded me. I froze like a deer, and then a massive black Rolls Royce swerved around me, its tires hitting a deep puddle and sending a wave of filthy gutter water crashing over me. The force of it nearly knocked me down. I stood there drenched in water that smelled like oil and garbage, coughing and sputtering. The car stopped. For a moment I thought the driver might apologize, might ask if I was okay. Instead, the rear window rolled down, and a man in an expensive suit leaned out. He was maybe 40, with slicked back hair, and a face that looked like it had never known a day of real struggle. His eyes scanned me up and down with pure disgust. "Get out of the road, you piece of trash," he sneered. His voice was cold, clipped, the kind of voice that was used to being obeyed. "You're blocking traffic. Go back to whatever gutter you crawled out of." Before I could respond, before I could even process the sheer cruelty of his words, the window rolled up and the car sped away, leaving me standing there in the rain, trembling with rage and humiliation. I wanted to scream. I wanted to chase after that car and pound on the windows and tell him that I was not trash, that I was a mother trying to save her son, that I had once been someone too. But what good would it do? Men like him never listened to women like me. I stumbled forward, my chest tight, and finally made it to the pharmacy. The fluorescent lights were harsh after the darkness of the storm. I grabbed a bottle of children's ibuprofen and a cheap thermometer, counting out crumpled dollar bills and loose change at the register. The cashier, a tired-looking woman with dark circles under her eyes, did not meet my gaze. She had seen people like me before. Desperate, drowning, invisible. On my way back, I took a shortcut through an alley behind a closed restaurant. That is where I saw her. An old woman hunched over a dumpster, her hands bony and gnarled as she dug through garbage bags. She wore layers of filthy clothing, a coat that might have once been tan, but was now a patchwork of stains and tears. Her grey hair hung in tangled ropes around her face. For a second, I felt that instinctive recoil, that fear that society teaches us. Homeless people were dangerous, unpredictable, diseased. That is what we are told. But then I saw the group of young men, college age, maybe stumbling drunk down the alley. They had spotted her too. One of them picked up a beer bottle and hurled it in her direction. It shattered against the dumpster, and she cried out a thin, frightened sound. They laughed, a cruel braying sound that made my stomach turn. "Hey, crazy lady," one of them shouted. "You looking for dinner? Want us to help you?" Another one picked up a chunk of concrete from the crumbling alley wall and threw it. It hit her shoulder, and she stumbled back, her eyes wide with terror. And just like that, I was moving. I did not think. I just ran toward her, my body acting on its own, fueled by a rage I did not even know I had been carrying. "Leave her alone," I screamed, positioning myself between the old woman and the men. My voice came out stronger than I felt. "Just leave her alone." The men paused, surprised. One of them, the ringleader with a backwards baseball cap, sneered at me. "What are you, her bodyguard? She's just a crazy homeless bitch." "She's a human being." I shot back my hands, balled into fists. "And you're acting like animals. Get out of here before I call the cops." It was a bluff. I did not even have a working cell phone. But something in my voice, or maybe just the inconvenience of dealing with me, made them back off. They muttered insults under their breath, called us both crazy, and staggered away, their laughter fading into the rain. I turned to the old woman. She was pressed against the dumpster, her whole body shaking. Up close, I could see her face more clearly. Despite the dirt and the deep lines etched by hardship, there was something striking about her. Her eyes were a piercing grey blue, sharp and intelligent, and there was a dignity in the way she held herself, even in her fear. "Are you okay?" I asked gently, keeping my distance so I would not startle her. She nodded slowly. Her gaze fixed on me with an intensity that was almost unnerving. "You defended me," she said. Her voice was hoarse but refined the accent of someone educated. "Why?" I shrugged, suddenly exhausted. "Because no one deserves that. Because I know what it's like to be treated like you're nothing." We stood there in the rain for a long moment. Two women at the bottom of the world. And then I made a decision that would change everything. "Come with me," I said. "It's cold. You can stay at my place tonight." Her eyes widened. "You would do that?" "You don't know me." "No," I admitted, "but I can't just leave you here. Please." She hesitated, and then with a small nod, she followed me. We walked in silence back to my apartment building, and with every step, I wondered if I was making a terrible mistake. I was already violating my lease by having more people than allowed. If Mrs. Kowalski, my landlord, found out I had brought a homeless woman into the building, she would use it as ammunition to throw us out even faster. But looking at the old woman shivering beside me, I could not bring myself to care. When we got inside, my children stared at us with wide eyes. Emma, my oldest daughter, instinctively pulled the younger ones closer. Maddie was still on the couch, his breathing labored. I rushed to him, pressing my hand to his forehead. He was burning up. I gave him the medicine with shaking hands, whispering reassurances I did not believe. The old woman, Evelyn. She told me her name was, stood awkwardly by the door, taking in the cramped, messy apartment. I could see it through her eyes. The peeling wallpaper, the sagging furniture from Goodwill, the stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen counter, the toys scattered across the floor because we had no storage. It was humiliating. "I'm sorry." "It's not much," I said quietly, "but you're welcome to stay." She shook her head slowly, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "You have nothing, and yet you share it. That is more than most people with everything would do." That night, Evelyn slept on the floor with a pile of old blankets I scrounged up. I lay awake in my bed, which I shared with my two youngest, listening to Maddie's rattling breaths, and wondering how I was going to come up with $3,000 in less than 24 hours. I had already sold everything of value. My wedding ring from my failed marriage gone years ago, my laptop pawned, even my decent winter coat traded for groceries. There was nothing left. Morning came too soon. The pounding on the door started at 8 a.m. Mrs. Kowalski, my landlord, was a heavy-set woman in her 60s, with a permanent scowl and an uncanny ability to smell trouble. She had never liked me, had made it clear from the start that single mothers with too many kids were nothing but problems. Now she stood in my doorway, her arms crossed over her chest, her eyes scanning the apartment with undisguised contempt. "Where's my money, Lillian?" she demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. "Mrs. Kowalski, please." I started hating how my voice came out pleading. "I just need a little more time. I have a job interview next week, and if I get it, I can pay you back with interest, I swear." She snorted. "You've been saying that for months. I'm done being patient. You have until noon like the notice says. And what's that smell?" She wrinkled her nose, stepping further into the apartment. "Have you been letting homeless people in here? That's a violation of your lease, you know." "I could call CPS right now. Tell them you're exposing your kids to dangerous people living in unsanitary conditions." My blood ran cold. Child Protective Services. It was every struggling parent's nightmare. I had heard the stories knew women who had lost their children, not because they were bad mothers, but because they were poor. The system did not care about love. It cared about checkboxes and middle-class standards. "Please," I whispered. "Please don't do that. I'll figure something out. I'll get the money." But before Mrs. Kowalski could respond, Evelyn appeared from the bathroom. She had cleaned herself up as best she could with our meager supplies, and somehow, despite her ragged clothes, she carried herself with an air of authority that made Mrs. Kowalski take a step back. "Excuse me," Evelyn said, her voice cool and commanding, "but I believe you are in violation of the Fair Housing Act by threatening this woman. Under Illinois state law, you are required to provide a minimum of 30 days' notice before eviction proceedings can begin for non-payment of rent, and you must file through the court system. A simple notice taped to a door is not legally sufficient. Additionally, threatening to report her to Child Protective Services as retaliation for her exercising her tenant rights constitutes illegal harassment under Section 5-12-160 of the Chicago Municipal Code." Mrs. Kowalski's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I stared at Evelyn in shock. This woman who had been digging through garbage 12 hours ago was reciting housing law like a lawyer. "Who the hell are you?" Mrs. Kowalski sputtered. "Someone who knows the law better than you do." Evelyn replied calmly. "Now I suggest you leave and follow proper legal procedures if you wish to pursue eviction. Otherwise, I will be happy to contact legal aid on Ms. Lillian's behalf, and you will find yourself on the wrong end of a lawsuit." Mrs. Kowalski's face turned an ugly shade of red, but she backed toward the door. "This isn't over," she hissed at me, and then she was gone, her footsteps heavy on the stairs. I turned to Evelyn, my mind reeling. "How did you—" I started, but she held up a hand. "I wasn't always like this," she said softly. "There was a time when I had resources knowledge. That life is gone now, but the knowledge remains." Over the next few days, Evelyn became an unexpected fixture in our chaotic household. She cleaned not in the way of someone doing a favor, but with the efficiency of someone who had once managed a staff. She organized our tiny kitchen, taught the kids table manners, and somehow made our food stamps stretch further than I ever had. She spoke to the children with a gentleness that broke my heart, reading to them from library books in a cultured voice that seemed utterly out of place in our shabby apartment. But it was with Maddie that she truly shone. When his breathing grew worse one afternoon, I panicked, ready to brave the hospital bills, but Evelyn stopped me. She examined him with a practiced eye, asked questions about his symptoms and medical history, and then told me exactly what to watch for, which signs meant immediate danger, and which meant we could manage at home a little longer. She elevated his head, showed me breathing exercises to help him monitor his oxygen levels by watching the color of his nail beds and lips. She knew things, medical things. "Who are you?" I asked her one evening after the kids had gone to bed. Maddie was sleeping more peacefully than he had in days, thanks to her care. "Really, who are you?" She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in those grey-blue eyes. Pain, anger, fear. "I was someone once," she said finally. "Someone important, but they took it all away. They said I was insane, locked me up and stole everything I had built. My own son did this to me. Before I could press her for more, Maddie's condition took a sharp turn. It was 3 in the morning when Emma shook me awake, her face pale with terror. "Mum," she whispered. "Maddie's coughing up blood. I have never moved so fast in my life." Maddie was sitting up on the couch, his small body racked with coughs, and there was blood on his chin, on his shirt, bright red and terrifying. Evelyn was already beside him, her face grim. "Call 911, she said. "Now. This is beyond what we can manage." I did not argue. My hands shook so badly I could barely dial, but I got through, gave them our address, and then I held my son while we waited for the ambulance. He felt so small in my arms, so fragile, like he might break. The paramedics arrived within 10 minutes, and they worked with practiced efficiency, getting him onto a stretcher, starting an IV, asking me questions I barely registered. At the hospital, everything became a blur of white walls and antiseptic smells, and doctors with serious faces. They did tests, so many tests, and finally a cardiologist, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and terrible news, sat me down in a private consultation room. "Your son needs a heart valve replacement," he said gently. "It's a complicated surgery, but it's his only chance. Without it, I don't think he has more than a few weeks." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Okay, when can you do it?" He glanced down at the tablet in his hands, and I saw his expression change. "Ms. Garcia," he said, and I heard the shift in his tone. "Your son doesn't have insurance. The surgery, the hospital stay, the follow-up care, we're looking at approximately $200,000. Even with payment plans, we need at least $50,000 as a deposit before we can schedule the surgery." 200,000, 50,000. The numbers were so absurd, they did not even feel real. I might as well have needed 50 million. "I don't have that," I whispered. "But please, you have to help him. He's 10 years old. Please." "I'm sorry," the doctor said, and he sounded like he meant it. "Without the deposit, the hospital board won't approve the surgery. We can keep him comfortable, manage his symptoms, but I can't in good conscience tell you that will be enough." I did what I had never let myself do in front of my children, in front of anyone. I fell to my knees in that sterile consultation room, and I begged. I begged him to save my son. I offered to clean the hospital, to work for free, to sign over every future paycheck. I promised things I had no way of delivering. And through it all, the doctor just looked at me with pity, the kind of pity that changes nothing. Eventually a nurse helped me up and led me back to Maddie's room. He was sleeping an oxygen mask over his face monitors, beeping softly. Emma had brought the other kids, and they clustered around his bed, their faces scared and confused. Evelyn stood by the window, staring out at the city lights, her posture rigid. "I can't save him," I said to her, my voice breaking. "I can't save my own son." She turned to look at me, and there was a fierceness in her expression that I had not seen before. "Yes, you can," she said, "but not alone. Give me a moment, Saz." She walked out of the room, and I did not have the energy to follow. I just sat beside Maddie, holding his hand, feeling him slip away from me with every labored breath. Emma was crying softly. My 6-year-old twins were clinging to each other. My 3-year-old did not understand why everyone was sad. This was my family, and I was watching it crumble. When Evelyn returned an hour later, she looked different. There was color in her cheeks, a determination in her stride. She sat beside me and pulled something from the deep pocket of her coat, a photograph old and creased, protected in a plastic bag. "Look at this," she said, pressing it into my hands. It was a picture from maybe 30 years ago. A younger Evelyn, elegant in a navy suit, standing in front of a massive modern building with a sign that read Brooks Memorial Hospital. She was cutting a red ribbon, smiling for the cameras. Beside her stood a distinguished-looking man, and a young boy, maybe 8 years old, with dark hair and a serious expression. "That's me," Evelyn said quietly. "Evelyn Brooks, the hospital we're in right now. My late husband and I founded it. That's our son Henry beside me. And this," she pulled out a newspaper clipping from the same plastic bag, "is the obituary they published 5 years ago, declaring me dead." I stared at the clipping. There was a picture of Evelyn, professional, and polished with dates of birth and death. It talked about her philanthropy, her business acumen, her tragic death in a car accident. But she was sitting right next to me, very much alive. "I don't understand," I said. "My younger son Richard," she said, and her voice was cold with rage. "He wanted control of the family fortune. He had me declared mentally incompetent, forced me into a psychiatric facility, and when I tried to fight back, he made it look like I had died. He forged documents, bribed officials, did whatever it took. I escaped from that facility a year ago, but by then I had nothing. No identification, no money, no way to prove who I was. I was too afraid to come forward because Richard has power connections. He would have locked me up again, or worse." She looked at me with those piercing eyes. "But I can't stay silent anymore. Not when your son is dying in the hospital I built. Not when you risked everything to help me. We're going to expose Richard. We're going to get my life back. And we're going to save Maddie." The plan came together quickly. Evelyn remembered details that only she could know. Account numbers, legal documents, the name of her personal attorney, a man named Lawrence Chen, who she believed was still alive and had been frozen out by Richard. We tracked him down through public records, and when Evelyn called him from a hospital phone, pretending to be a paralegal, his reaction told us everything. He had never believed she was dead. But confronting Richard would not be easy. He was not just wealthy. According to news articles I found online, he was now running for state senator, campaigning on a platform of family values and charitable giving. The irony was sickening. He was using his mother's legacy, a woman he had erased, to build his political career. We had 48 hours before the hospital would discharge Maddie for inability to pay. 48 hours to execute what was essentially a desperate gamble. Evelyn wanted to go to his estate to confront him publicly during one of his campaign fundraisers. It was risky, but she believed that with enough witnesses, with the media present, he would not be able to simply make her disappear again. The night of the fundraiser, I borrowed a car from a neighbor, an old Honda with a busted muffler. Evelyn sat beside me wearing the cleanest clothes we could assemble, her hair pulled back in a bun. She looked dignified, despite everything. In the back seat, I had hidden a bag with copies of all the documents we had gathered, the photograph, the clippings, and a letter from Lawrence Chen, confirming his willingness to testify. The Brooks estate was in the suburbs, a sprawling mansion that looked like something from a movie. Cars lined the circular driveway, expensive sedans and sports cars. People in cocktail dresses and suits milled around the entrance, champagne flutes in hand. We did not fit in. We looked like exactly what we were, intruders from a different world. Security stopped us at the gate. "This is a private event," the guard said, barely glancing at us. "You need an invitation." "I'm Evelyn Brooks." Evelyn said, her voice steady. "This is my home. I demand to see my son." The guard looked at her like she was insane, which I suppose from his perspective, she appeared to be. An old homeless-looking woman, claiming to be a dead billionaire. He reached for his radio, probably to call for backup, but Evelyn pushed past him with surprising strength. I followed, my heart pounding. We made it halfway up the driveway before more security appeared. Hands grabbed at us, voices shouted, and then through the crowd I saw him, Richard Brooks. He was older than in the photograph, his hair graying at the temples, but I recognized him instantly. He was the man from the Rolls Royce, the man who had called me trash. Recognition flickered in his eyes when he saw me, and then his gaze shifted to Evelyn. For just a moment, his carefully composed expression cracked, and I saw pure terror. Then it was gone, replaced by cold calculation. "What is this?" he said loudly, addressing the crowd of donors and reporters. "Some kind of sick prank, security. Remove these people immediately." But Evelyn stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice carried across the lawn. "Hello, Richard. It's been a long time since you locked your mother away and told the world she was dead." The crowd went silent. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing. Richard's face turned ashen, but he recovered quickly. "This woman is clearly mentally ill," he said smoothly. "She's been harassing my family for months, claiming to be my late mother. It's tragic, really. Someone call the police and have her taken to a psychiatric facility." "I can prove who I am," Evelyn said. She began reciting details. the name of Richard's childhood dog, the color of the wallpaper in his first nursery, the account numbers for the family trust. With every word, Richard's composure slipped further. Reporters were recording everything. "Stop it," Richard hissed, stepping closer. His mask was crumbling. "You're dead. You're supposed to be dead." "But I'm not," Evelyn said, "and everyone is going to know what you did." Richard's hand shot out, gripping Evelyn's arm hard enough to bruise. "Security," he barked. "I want them arrested for trespassing. Now." That was when Henry appeared. He was older than in the photograph, but with the same serious expression, wearing a cardigan and glasses, looking professorial and out of place among the political operatives. He had been standing at the edge of the crowd, and now he pushed forward, his face pale. "Richard, what's going on?" he asked. "Who is this woman?" "Tell him," Evelyn said, her eyes locked on Richard. "Tell your brother what you did to me." "She's insane," Richard spat. "Henry, go back inside. This is none of your concern." But Henry was staring at Evelyn now, really looking at her. His eyes traveled to her hands, and he saw something there. A scar maybe, or a ring, some detail I could not see from where I stood. His face went white. "Mother," he whispered. Richard moved fast. He grabbed Evelyn and started dragging her toward a side entrance away from the cameras. I lunged after them, but security blocked me. That was when I did the only thing I could think of. I started screaming. "He's kidnapping her," I yelled at the top of my lungs. He locked his mother in a mental institution and stole her fortune. He's trying to silence her. "Someone call the police." My voice cut through the genteel murmur of the party. Guests pulled out their phones, reporters rushed forward, and Henry, bless him, threw himself at his brother with a fury I had not expected from such a mild-looking man. "Let her go!" Henry shouted, grabbing Richard's arm. The two brothers struggled, and Evelyn wrenched herself free. She stumbled, and I caught her. In the chaos, Richard made one last desperate move. He pulled a syringe from his jacket pocket, presumably filled with some kind of sedative, and lunged at Evelyn. But Henry tackled him, and they both went down hard on the manicured lawn. The syringe flew from Richard's hand and landed in the grass, evidence of his intent. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police. When they arrived, it was Richard they handcuffed, not us. Too many witnesses, too many cameras. The lead officer listened to Evelyn's story, examined the documents Lawrence Chen had sent over, and made a call to his superior. Within an hour, Richard was being charged with kidnapping, forgery, and fraud. The media descended like vultures. Henry, once he understood what had happened, was devastated and furious in equal measure. He had been told his mother died in an accident. He had grieved for her. Richard had manipulated him, kept him away from the family business, all while stealing their mother's legacy. Now Henry stood beside Evelyn, his arm around her shoulders, tears streaming down his face. The first thing Evelyn did, once her identity was legally restored, was make a phone call to Brooks Memorial Hospital. I stood beside her in Henry's living room, the mansion that should have been hers all along, and listened as she spoke with the hospital administrator. "This is Evelyn Brooks," she said, her voice calm, but brooking no argument. "I am calling about a patient, Maddie Garcia. I want him scheduled for surgery immediately. I will be covering all costs. And if there is any delay, any bureaucratic nonsense, I will be making some calls to the board of directors, many of whom still remember who really built that hospital." The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. Maddie made it through, and the recovery was long and difficult. But he survived. Watching him breathe without pain, without that blue tinge to his lips, was the greatest gift I had ever received. In the months that followed, everything changed. Richard's trial became a media sensation. The charges kept mounting as investigators dug deeper. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. His political career was obliterated. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Henry took over the family business and worked with Evelyn to restructure it, focusing on genuine charitable work rather than the performative philanthropy Richard had used as a front. Evelyn, for her part, threw herself into advocacy for the homeless and for reform of the mental health system. She had lived it. She knew the gaps. the cruelty, the way society discarded people. As for me, Evelyn insisted on setting up a trust fund for my children's education and helping me secure stable housing. But more than that, she offered me a job managing a new center. She was founding a place to help single mothers get back on their feet. It was work that meant something, work where I could use my own experiences to help others. Henry and I grew close over those months. He was kind, thoughtful, everything his brother was not. He treated my children like they mattered, and slowly, carefully, something bloomed between us. It was not a fairy tale romance. It was quieter than that, built on mutual respect and shared purpose, but it was real. The last time I saw Mrs. Kowalski, I was on television standing beside Evelyn at the opening of the new center. The camera caught her face in the crowd outside, and I saw the recognition, the shock, the envy. She had thrown away any chance at human decency, had kicked people when they were down, and now she had to watch as one of those people rose up. But I did not feel triumphant looking at her. I just felt tired and grateful. Grateful that Evelyn had come into my life when I needed her most. Grateful that my son was alive. Grateful that sometimes, just sometimes, the people who deserve to fall actually do, and the people who deserve a chance actually get one. Maddie is 12 now, healthy and loud and obsessed with basketball. My other kids are thriving. Evelyn is back where she belongs, using her wealth and power to actually help people instead of just talking about it. Henry proposed last month, and I said yes, not because he could give me security, but because he saw me as an equal, as someone with value beyond what I could provide. And sometimes late at night, I think about that moment in the rain when I saw Evelyn being attacked and made the choice to step in. I could have walked away. Most people would have, but I didn't. And that one choice, that one moment of refusing to let cruelty go unchallenged, changed everything. The world tells us that we have to look out for ourselves, that kindness is a luxury poor people can't afford. But that's a lie. Kindness isn't about having extra. It's about recognizing the humanity in others, even when the world tells you they don't matter. It's about refusing to become the kind of person who drives past someone in need, or worse, who splashes them with gutter water and calls them trash. We all have more power than we think we do. The power to help, the power to stand up, the power to refuse to let the world make us cruel. What would you have done if you saw someone being hurt? Would you have walked away? Would you have stopped to help? Think about it, because someday you might be in that position and your choice might change everything. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about real people overcoming impossible odds. Drop a comment below telling me about a time when you chose kindness even when it was hard. Let's build a community that believes in lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down. Thank you for listening, and remember your story matters too.